So obviously the canon is made up of those books that have had the most influence, and so they're the most fundamental. Whether you agree with them or not is beside the point. You need to know them because they're at the bottom of your culture, and that's you.
Jordan Peterson, welcome to AEI.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
It's just so nice to find a fellow traveler. My God, I started out years ago with Camille Paglia.
Yeah.
We've been fighting this battle, but we have stronger and stronger allies, and we've got you, and it's amazing. And when I hear you talk about topics that have concerned me for years, I mean the politicization of the curriculum, the madness that's taken over feminism, and...
Think you're making any progress?
I don't know. I get worried because if it 20 years ago or more, when Camille and I fought the first culture war, we thought we won, and we did in the court of public opinion, but they assumed the assistant professorships. So they've been the teachers. They're in the schools of education.
They're certainly in the schools of education.
Yes.
That's for sure.
And so sometimes I feel like just common sense, open discussion, debate, it's all imperiled. And when you say so, sometimes people think you're a crank or you're overstating it. And I have a lot of self-doubt, so I think, well, maybe I am. And then,
it's not easy to tell, eh?
Well, then the James Damore happens, and he gets fired for
saying what was true.
What was true.
And what has been increasingly documented as true since he got fired, right? By huge scale
and what
studies.
Everybody says and knows. But now it's apparently dangerous to state the obvious, given the current orthodoxies. So to me, it's just been wonderful that you have found a way around it. It's not that you were able to defeat what was going on in the university, because you had maybe accidentally, just this insane encounter when you were told how you had to speak and you protested, but now you've taken another path and you're reaching millions of people through your videos and then, the lectures and the videos of lectures. And I'm just wondering if that's not the future of education, is a kind of alternative learning system.
Well, I think it's the present of education
so
to some degree. I mean, because you can find out about anything you want on YouTube. Now it's a bit, there's part of it that's a bit anarchic, let's say, because
there are false prophets.
Well, that's it. That's the thing. It's not that easy to distinguish between valid and invalid information. I mean, when we had more reliable gatekeepers in place, let's say back in the heyday of journalism, when Time magazine was still 3/8 of an inch thick and 90% print, then there was some consensus on what constituted reliable and valid information. And YouTube, you can learn anything about anything, and maybe that's not exactly optimal, but I think it's reasonable to have faith in people's ability to sift through the chaff and get to the wheat. And so maybe it's a good thing overall.
I mean, I do think, in the future people look back and say, well, that was anarchic. And, it's amazing anybody got any education. But I think people are discerning. I don't think it's an accident that you sort of rose to the top. I mean, I accidentally happened upon one of your videos and was just amazed, like, wow, he's making so much sense. And at the time you weren't addressing culture war issues and feminism, but maybe postmodernism and some related issues. And I found you on YouTube and then started following you. And I find, even if I look at the comments, and I've looked at the comments on your videos, I have a lot of very smart followers. The comments are civil. I think I have some, maybe you have better, but I think I have some of the most intelligent comments on YouTube.
On the YouTube, well, YouTube can be quite the hell, quite the hell of comments.
But I don't get them.
No, and most of the comments on my YouTube videos are civil and reasonable.
Because people have to listen, and it takes patience and attention. So I think the trolls are just, they lose interest in it, the attention span.
Yeah, could be. Well, and on this tour that I've been doing, one of the things that makes me optimistic is the fact that I'm presenting, I would say, difficult material, and in a relatively difficult way. It's certainly, I would say, it's as intellectually challenging as I can manage, and it's also emotionally challenging, and there's an immense public demand for it. And there's an immense public hunger for long-form discussions of the type that no one thought a television audience, so to speak, was capable of engaging in. So I have a sneaking suspicion that people are a lot smarter than our previous communication technologies revealed. And, you know, people are listening to podcasts like mad too, and lengthy ones, and audiobook sales are spiking because it looks like more people can listen than can read. And so that's the positive end of the social media explosion, I would say, the video and the podcast end in particular.
Yes, and people are, what amazes me is when I hear, I'll listen to tapes, you know, of your lectures with Sam Harris, or I don't know, the other day with Dave Rubin
and Ben Shapiro.
And Ben Shapiro. Yeah. And you do a little bit of politics, but then it's on to Maimonides and, you know, the Christian theologians versus the Talmudic Christian. It's very intellectual. And
that's got 1 million views in some already.
In a few, I mean, just instantly.
Yeah, it's really something.
And I found I couldn't stop listening. And some of what you do reminds me of just the delight in college courses before the curriculum became race, class, gender, you know, in the humanities. At NYU in the, I don't want to say late 60s, it was the late 60s, I took courses with this professor, Jim Carse, and we would read Viktor Frankl and Mircea Eliade and Paul Tillich and Barth and the existentialists, and it was so stimulating and it was so thought-provoking and wonderful, and the class, and he was a great teacher, and it seems like that's not there anymore. Like, it was everybody that was interested in ideas could have a semester. I mean, now if you take philosophy, it's a little arid and analytic, but there was the philosophy of religion and there was the religion department where you could have that. And his courses were so popular, teaching these writers.
Yep.
He could have enrolled the entire school. And I just thought, like, okay, that's what
well, you know,
doing.
one of the advantages, to some degree, I've thought about this, is that as the universities abandon the classical humanities, they leave that material around for anyone else to pick up. Yeah, well, that's it. It's so, you know, there's a rule that I wrote from 12 Rules for Life was derived from an original list of 42 rules that I put on Quora, and one of them was opportunity exists where responsibility has been abdicated. And I think that's really the case. It's like maybe the postmodernists are right and the classic humanities, the Western canon, has no value. It's only arbitrary. It's like, so fine, they can abandon it. Well, if it has no value, it'll disappear. If it has value, then other people will find the value and start to capitalize on it, let's say, in terms of ability to attract audiences. And
the works of art will fight for themselves. Because as people read them, to read, you know, Henry James or to read, you know, some forgotten author that, you know, they're not assigning. I've just been reading Saul Bellow. He was just so good. And
these people were actually good. I mean, I have people all the time now who come up to me and thank me because they've started to read great literature, but often they've started with Dostoevsky because I'm such a Dostoevsky fan. And, you know, they're just completely knocked over by Crime and Punishment, which is a book that will definitely knock you over.
I'm afraid to read it again. It knocked me over, and it probably responsible for me becoming so interested in philosophy in 11th grade. We had it with Miss Sullivan, and wow, it was powerful. I'm now I prefer, you know, Tolstoy. And I told my friend, and she said, "Well, Dostoevsky's for teenagers, and Tolstoy's for when you're." But you don't agree?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have read a couple of the books, of Dostoevsky's books, the second time, and I would say they didn't have the same impact the second time. But I think that's also partly because they had such an impact the first time. Right. You know, and Tolstoy is more sociological in orientation, and you know, maybe that is something that's more interesting in some sense as you get older. It's hard for me to say. I always preferred Dostoevsky to Tolstoy because I'm more psychologically minded. But
I loved The Idiot. When I read that, I mean, not recently, but more recently, and so I'm going to give Dostoevsky more of a chance. But what you say is so important, and I think it was André Gide said that everything important to say has been said, but nobody's listening. So you have to say it again and again and again. And that's how I feel, that I feel like I have to introduce college audiences to the, you know, Western political, classical liberal tradition. They may not have been acquainted with the arguments for free speech and due process.
Very likely. They're
Isn't
acquainted with very little. Yeah, well, that is a real opportunity, because those things are actually unbelievably exciting if you can get into the spirit of them, and so that's something that I'm hoping to do a lot more of in the upcoming years, is to revitalize some of the fundamental classics of the Western canon. I've also thought about the idea of the canon, because that's come under criticism, and I have a couple of associates who are working with me on an online education system, and we've been trying to define what constitutes the canon technically. And you can actually do that. We don't have to argue about what the canon is, because you imagine that you could rank order books in terms of the number of other books that they've influenced. So obviously the canon is made up of those books that have had the most influence, and so they're the most fundamental. Whether you agree with them or not is beside the point. You need to know them because they're at the bottom of your culture, and that's you. And that's what it's so funny, because it's what the social constructionists claim. You're a product of your culture. It's like, well, then you should probably know its fundamental writings, since they make up a huge part of your being.
And you should know something about a conversation that has been taking place among geniuses, creative geniuses, over the centuries with one another, and how it
Who else would you want to listen to?
Of course. And I always felt that I was just giving my students this gift that they could sort of listen in and help them, approach it. And then suddenly, oh no, we're not teaching that anymore. And but I'm still hopeful that.
Well, I think the statement you made, that great art will speak for itself, will fight for itself.
It fights for itself.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So
that's
we have
part
to keep
of what
fighting.
makes it
we
great.
have to keep having secret meetings of the intellectual dark web. Although we haven't had any, it's not a very good conspiracy.
No, it's like herding cats fundamentally.
Yeah. But I think the success of it is owed not because we feel like we're oppressed and we have to speak in the dark web, because I think we give voice to ideas that many people have thought themselves, but maybe didn't feel confident to say.
I think there's a difference too between being oppressed and being attacked by a minority. Like, I certainly don't feel oppressed. I have more media reach than I know what to do with, and most of what I've experienced from people has been overwhelming support. There's a minority of noisy journalists.
Yes, some snarky journalists
and some
Vox
kids on university campuses that are deluded by their idiot professors. But other than that, it's been. And I shouldn't minimize that, because I was under quite a lot of stress for the first year and a half or so that this all took place. But most of the consequence of that has been extraordinarily positive. And I get to come here and talk to you, so that's a good thing.
Oh, it's so nice finally to be able to sit down and talk with you. So thank you so much for coming to AEI. I hope you come back, and I'll meet you out there in the IDW.
Great. Very nice to see you. Yep.
Hey everyone, that's the end of our discussion with Jordan Peterson. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed what you saw, remember to like the video or leave us a comment, and be sure to check out the rest of our videos and the research from AEI.